So right now, I'd like to announce this evening's presentation, which I think you're all going to enjoy immensely. Our presenters this evening are Turquoise Mountain. And Turquoise Mountain was the brainchild of Rory Stewart, now a parliamentarian, but back then, when he walked across Afghanistan from Herat to Jalalabad, I believe it was Herat to Jalalabad. It may have been Herat to Kabul. He wrote a book, and he did a whole lot of things in Afghanistan, one of which was founding Turquoise Mountain. And Turquoise Mountain is wonderful for Afghanistan because it shows that there is an element of quality, of beauty, of traditional Afghan design that has not been infused with ersatz Pakistani styles, and they have done great work. They have restored 112 buildings to their original form in old Kabul, and they are creating a new industry over gemstones and jewelry, and promoting this as a kind of cutting edge for people to understand that Afghanistan is more than just, you know, the kind of slapped together kind of material structures that we see so often. And to me, that's very important because as a student of Afghanistan, I want to see the best and the brightest come out of this country after all these years of conflict. Presenting the Turquoise Mountain presentation this evening is Dr. Tommy Wide. Dr. Wide has a PhD in Afghanistan history from Oxford. And he knows about Afghanistan's history and traditions, and he is a great person to carry on Rory Stewart's vision. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Tommy Wide, CEO, President of Turquoise Mountain. Tommy, welcome to AACC.
Thank you very much. و به عرض سلام و خسته نباشید خدمت شما بزرگواران شما عزیزان را به AACC خوش آمدید میگویم. بدبختانه فکر میکنم که زیاد نفر که هیچ باشند زبان فارسی گپ نبزنند دری گپ نبزنند پس ما باید زبان انگلیسی استفاده کنیم امشب. So welcome everyone here today. It's a great honor to be here. I'm straight off the red eye from Kabul, but very delighted to have made it, if rather jet lagged. And today I wanted to talk about this project that is very close to my heart indeed. In fact, I lost my 20s to this project. I'm told they're the best years of my life and they're now over, but it's been a really phenomenal experience for me. And what I'd like to do is just start with a short film, and then I'm going to talk more about the story of Turquoise Mountain and the regeneration of Murad Khani. And if there's any questions afterwards, I'd be delighted to take them. That just gives you a little feel of what the project feels like when one's living in the old city. I first came as a 22-year-old. I was a Persian translator for Rory, actually, when he was setting up. And I came as a gap year student. In Britain, a gap year student is someone who doesn't really know what they're doing. And I just graduated from college, and I wanted some time off. I wanted to experience the world. I happened to have studied Persian, so it seemed like a good option. And I never thought that 7 years later, I'd still be here. And I'll show you where we are based now. So this is Murad Khani. I'm sure many of you have been there before. It's very much in the heart of the old city of Kabul. It's an 18th century district, famously where the Qizilbash lived, the Qizilbash being a Turkic ethnic minority that came with the Nader Shah Afshar in the mid-18th century and made a home here, just north of the Kabul River. But when we arrived, Murad Khani, which had once been this great cultural center, had become essentially a slum, a refuse heap for an expanding city. The whole area was under several meters of garbage. The houses had been on the front line in the civil war of the early 90s, and many of them had been hit by rockets, or they had fallen into disrepair. This house is a beautiful early 19th century merchant house that was completely derelict when we found it, empty. The left wing, which actually later collapsed and we had to restore completely, had been hit by a rocket. So when we arrived, here's a merchant palace that was being used as a storehouse for bananas and for electric cables. Everywhere the foundations were rotten, and one of these buildings was collapsing about once every month. You can see here in the top left corner we had goats living on the top floor. And the foundations in this building were completely rotten. This building we actually had to lift up a meter in the air on hydraulic jacks and then put in new foundations and actually drop it back down again. So this whole caravanserai lifted and put back down. So we started essentially as a large labor scheme, employment scheme. We said to any member of the old city that wanted a job that we would hire them, and we gave them a wheelbarrow, and we started by clearing garbage. As we dug, it was almost like the city was preserved under formaldehyde, that these beautiful buildings would start to emerge out of the garbage as we dug down. So you can see here, this is the back of the Ziyarat-e Abu Fazl, a very famous Shia site in Murad Khani. Here's the garbage as it was half cleared, and this is it once we'd finished. Now this building here, you can see that it was about 2-3 meters high in garbage. You couldn't actually live in the bottom floor. There was one family squatting on the second floor, and the bottom floor was complete garbage. So as we dug through, these houses started to emerge. So we started with this small courtyard and restored it to how it had been before. And at the same time as we were restoring these buildings, we were ourselves learning or relearning these old traditional crafts. We had over 8,000 Afghans working with us, with international engineers and architects. So they were learning essentially on the job as we went. That was in earth architecture, but also in terms of timber construction, roof building, and the kind of carpentry needed to do the elaborate windows that you'll see here. These are known as patai, as many of you will know. Pata meaning a step. It's a stepped window. And in this caravanserai, every side was built out of these patais. So in the midsummer, you can open up the whole area. It's open plan. So this building, I showed you a photo earlier. This was it before in 2007. I took this in March. And this is it now. And this is now the centerpiece of our institute, the National Institute for Afghan Arts and Architecture. So we're training around 200 students a year in calligraphy, ceramics, woodwork, jewelry, using these buildings as the base and the inspiration for the teaching that goes on there. Another structure, while it was in restoration, you can see where a rocket had actually come through on the top floor. And this is it today. Another courtyard, a late 19th century courtyard, now used as our cultural center where we run exhibitions. So every year we do various exhibitions internationally as well as nationally. This year we did one at the National Museum based on Ghaznavid culture. So our students and artisans were making pieces inspired by the great Afghan kingdom of the Ghaznavids. This building is now our dormitory. So started derelict. You can see how the all the pillars had actually been eroded away from the left-hand side. And this is it now. And now this is where students who come from outside Kabul come and study. This, which was, again, a storehouse. In fact, during the time of the Taliban, they were making rubber shoes there out of rubber tires. This we restored, and it's become a great cultural center now. So we do events, music concerts, and it's an area where the community comes together. One of the beauties of the project, that this was community development in the truest sense of the word. We were asked in by the community, and they pushed us at every step of the way to do new things, be creative, be innovative. Now, I think there's a common stereotype or a common complaint I heard amongst Westerners and expats working in Afghanistan, which was that things were very slow in Afghanistan. It took a long time to get things done. That was absolutely not the case for us. This was a very fast project. And in fact, the Afghans, the community who lived there, were pushing us to do more and more all the time. So we never really planned to go beyond a few buildings, but it just started to take on a life of its own. We started to do paving, and then water supplies, full electricity and sanitation across the whole area, 3.5 hectares worth, which we then rigged up to the municipal grid. And the community said to us they wanted primary education. They weren't happy just with the buildings. And we weren't sure about this. We didn't have teachers. We didn't really see ourselves as a primary education NGO. But they pushed us, and we said, okay, we'll do a literacy course. So we said, tomorrow, come if you're interested in literacy. And the next morning, 200 people came. And we thought, okay, well, we need to make a school. So this was in 2007. I had no idea how to start a school in Afghanistan. But we started in a small room. One of the members of the community gave us their room to use, and we started to teaching. But we said to the community, we'll only do it if girls can study as well as boys. And there was a certain reticence, a certain resistance against that from the fathers in Murad Khani, who said, well, what are you going to teach them? We're not happy with you teaching our girls, poisonous texts or anything. So we said, okay, come and sit at the back of the class, and you can actually watch what we're teaching, and you can decide if you're happy with it. So the first day, we had about 15 fathers sitting in the back of the classroom, watching the classes as they went on. And after about a week, everyone was so bored that they stopped coming. And then, from then on, we were able to keep teaching those girls. And we now have over 160 boys and girls studying in that primary school every day. And here are some of them. Another thing was healthcare. We were not a healthcare NGO. We didn't know anything about healthcare. But again, the community said, we'll give you the space if you'll build us the building. So we went into a partnership with them, essentially. Sometimes an uneasy one, but they pushed us again. So we built a modern, well-fitted clinic, built in traditional style using mud and timber. And we managed to get donated equipment from all over the world. And now we have this phenomenal family health center that sees over 20,000 patients a year. And it's quite an innovative system in that it's a Robin Hood scheme where those who are able to pay and subsidize those who are unable to pay. So over 20,000 patients a year. And we specialize in child and maternal health care. So Dr. Khojesta, you see here, she can do, I'm told this is a lot, she can do over 10 ultrasounds a day. She's always telling me how many she's done that day. Alongside the restoration work we did in Murad Khani, as the project really took off and people started to come and visit, we got a lot of interest from UNESCO, who said, well, can you help us with our restoration work in Afghanistan? Obviously, Afghanistan has the most extraordinary cultural heritage, Timurid sites, Mughal sites, etc. So UNESCO approached us about working on the Gauhar Shad Mausoleum in Herat, one of the great jewels of Timurid architecture. So we did the woodwork windows in there, working with them, and it was all done by our Afghan artisans. So the beauty of the project was that it was using Afghan traditional skills, but reviving them and allowing Afghans to make money out of those things that were already part of their heritage. And I think one of the beauties of the project in general has been something very simple. So much of the development aid that's been spent in Afghanistan has been spent with this idea that what Afghanistan lacks, always saying what they don't have. You don't have clean water, your women don't have rights, your healthcare is very poor. We focused on what Afghanistan had, and we worked with Afghans to revive or to regenerate those skills that were already present. And I think that's been one of the keys to success. So now UNESCO want us to help them retile the dome. You can see it once had this glowing turquoise dome. And at the moment, we're doing samples made by our Afghan Kashi Sazan, our tile makers, to redo the whole dome. This is from the inside looking out. Along with UNESCO's partnership with us, we actually won the 2013 UNESCO Award for our restoration project in the Old City. It was the Asia Pacific Award of Distinction for the best regeneration project across the whole Asia Pacific region. So that was a real fitting tribute for our Afghan engineers and laborers who had made this project what it was. The other key part of the project, having built those buildings, having worked with that community, was to set up this National Institute. And it's now the only internationally accredited arts vocational institute in Afghanistan. So students are going through a 3-year, extremely rigorous education where they will come out with a British vocational training degree, which is called City and Guilds. It's calligraphy, ceramics, woodwork, jewellery. Here are some of our calligraphers and the kind of work they do. I'll show you another picture in a minute of the miniature work. Jewellery, this is one of our students, Manawar Shah, who works particularly in this. This is 24 karat gold. I actually bought that. That piece is made from gold that I bought with Manawar Shah in the bazaar, which was great fun. And this is our woodworking ustad, Abdul Hadi Khan, and I think a real example of that regeneration, that revival of traditional skills. Abdul Hadi Khan had been the king's woodworker in the 1950s. He's a specialist in a type of woodwork, a kind of jali, so lattice woodwork using Himalayan cedar and walnut from the north. But he hadn't been working for over 30 years. We actually found him selling bananas in the bazaar. And when we were looking for these guys who had those original skills, we asked around, where are the great woodworkers? And they said that so many of them have gone, but Abdul Hadi, that guy, he used to be the king's woodworker. So we hired him. He couldn't believe it. He was 79 years old. And we took him on again, where he was thinking about retirement. We actually used him to spearhead our whole institute. He was very much the figurehead. And he ran the woodworking school. He's actually just starting to reduce his workload now that he's 85. And he's handed on a lot of his skills now to these younger students. So Masood Baki on the right here is the new Jali teacher at our institute who studied under Abdul Hadi Khan. So you see that transmission of knowledge. Moving on, moving on. It was the last chain. It was so nearly broken. When we found people like Abdul Hadi, for example, his style of khatam kari, his wooden inlay, no one else was really doing it. It would have died with Abdul Hadi. So we really caught it just at that moment before it did. And then the Istalifi potters. I'm sure many of you have spent time up in Istalif, having melas and the like. And actually, when I first arrived in Afghanistan, I lived for 1.5 years up here with the potters. This is in the foothills of the Hindu Kush, about 1.5 hours north of Kabul. So they had this incredible natural glaze, this turquoise color you can see here. Very, very prevalent. You'll all, I'm sure you have these bowls in your houses, or you remember them from when you were growing up. This tradition was almost lost in the time of the Taliban. Istalif was a center for the resistance of Ahmad Shah Massoud, was based on one side. The Soviets had destroyed it in 1983, and before that, the British had destroyed it in 1843. So this village had been destroyed by subsequent waves of people coming through. And in the 90s, when the Taliban had essentially cut the country in two, they were no longer able to get this natural glaze they were using, which was a potash known as ishkar, that comes from Badakhshan. They weren't able to get it anymore, so they were using cheap Pakistani glazes that were much poorer quality. They had lead in, so they were dangerous to use. They were chipping. And so what we've done over the last 6 years is revive that old skill of using that ishkar glaze. And these pots we now sell all over the world. In fact, this collection here was for a Dubai restaurant called Kabara, a very trendy, kind of fashionable Dubai haunt, where we make all their ceramics for them. And the great thing about ceramics is that they smash. So you get repeat orders. Very important business model. Aside from the Institute, we also do as many exhibitions as possible, and I mentioned the National Museum. But last year we did one at the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. Extraordinary building designed by I.M. Pei. And this was really captured, I think, the project as a whole. It was called Tradition and Continuity in Afghan Art. So what we did was we took priceless Afghan works from the 14th to the 19th century from their permanent collection, and we made pieces in response to them. in conversation with them. And you see down here on the right there a beautiful turquoise bowl, extremely old, several hundred years old. And that on the, just hanging above on the left was a piece of jewelry, silver jewelry with aquamarine that was made in reference. That's it's a kind of barred, it's a wind motif that they used there. So showing the relevance, the contemporary relevance of these traditional artistic techniques and design in the contemporary world. This was another piece made by one of our students called Fakhriya Nizami. I have a picture of her making it here. Fakhriya was a refugee. She was born in Peshawar. She was from an Afghan family that had fled in the time of the Taliban. She was born in, just before actually it was the Civil War. She was born in 1989 or 90. And she has this technique called Nuqta Pardazi. It's a kind of Afghan pointillism, where you use a very fine brush, all using gold leaf, natural pigments. So these is lapis lazuli from Badakhshan. They're using turquoise, all using natural colors and pigments in order to make these works. And finally, I wanted to talk about the business side of what we do, because I think this is in many ways the most exciting, dynamic area of the project, and I think has wider implications or lessons for development in Afghanistan more generally, and certainly for the growth of the Afghan economy. So these artisans that we train for 3 years, it's always seemed to me that there's no point training without jobs at the end of it. The essential part of doing training is to allow these artisans to be able to make a living out of what they do. And so what we have is a business development program that when people graduate, we support them and mentor them through the phases to become a successful business. And this lady, Samira Kitman, is a good example. She's 23. She first came to study with us when she was 17. So I've known her for 6 years now. And when she graduated at the age of 20, she said she wanted to set up a calligraphy business. So we've supported her do that. It's called Muftai Hanar Fine Arts Limited. And she is essentially one of the most successful exporters of Afghan arts around the world currently. Just this year, she did a contract with a 5-star hotel in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, providing all the wall art for every room. So there were 1,700 hotel rooms, and she was doing the calligraphic works, these beautiful shamsa, handmade by 25 of her classmates from school, selling these and exporting them abroad. And she alone made $80,000 off this. So this is a 23-year-old Afghan female entrepreneur doing $80,000 of profit out of these traditional skills. And here's the hotel, the Anjum Hotel. And I might add that 3 weeks ago now, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, meeting with a building company that is building the biggest hotel in the world, which is also going to be in Mecca. And they have actually approached us, based on the work we did in Anjum, about doing more, using Afghan artisans to make architectural elements, all the artwork, furniture for the largest hotel in the world. This is a hotel with 6,000 rooms and at full occupancy, 27,000 people on site at any time. So contrary to that, you know, the trade imbalance that Afghanistan faces, I think it's 97% to 3% import-export. These crafts are of such high quality and are in demand that we can actually export it. It's one of those exports that's high value, relatively easy to export, and that we believe artisans can make really decent careers out of. For us, the craft industry can be a real driver of economic growth, and I think all the conversations around economic growth at the moment, which is on everyone's mind as, you know, we transition from that war economy to a peace economy, is the extractives and agriculture. But actually the craft industry has such a role to play in that. Certainly with the extractives, it adds value to those extractive industries. Think of the gemstones that at the moment get taken out of the country. If you can cut them, facet them, polish them, set them, design them, broker them, brand them, and sell them all in Afghanistan, you're keeping that whole value chain in the country. And that's what our training aims to do. We want to have beautiful Afghan design pieces selling around the world, but with all that value staying in the country. And right now we're just starting with Bloomingdale's, selling our jewelry there, and I'll show you some examples in a minute of how we're doing that. But another example of how Afghanistan can be synonymous with high-end, beautiful luxury is the Connaught Hotel in Mayfair in London, where we've actually made a whole Afghan suite for this 5-star hotel, using Afghan walnut from Takhar and Samangan. All done, we've used Nuristani patterns in some places, classical in others. And this is apparently, my mother went for tea there the other day and said that the owner of the hotel said it was one of the 3 most popular rooms in the whole of the Connaught. So here you can see the kind of woodwork that I'm sure many of you remember from the kind of townhouses that stood in Kabul earlier in the century. There are other products that we're bringing in all the time. One thinks of Hirati glass that has a very good chance to do well on the Northern European market particularly. Tiles, and also the kind of furniture we do using Afghan textiles. This right-hand side is for the Afghan parliament, which is being built by the Indian government at the moment. So we're developing furniture products that can sell abroad. I'm sure you know in Kabul that Turkish furniture is the thing that everyone wants, and that really saddens me because this is mass-produced, poor quality stuff. And actually, when Afghan artisans are making them themselves, they can make it just as cheaply as Turkish goods, but they're much more beautiful, and all the money is going back to Afghanistan. We're also working with architects across the US. So this is for an architecture firm in New York. This is for a house in upstate New York where we're doing all the wood paneling. And we also work with architects on the West Coast too, and in the Gulf, in doing this kind of large-scale architectural woodwork where we can really compete. You know, Morocco is a great source for this kind of woodwork traditionally, but actually Afghanistan can compete on price and actually is often better of quality as well. So to go back to gemstones, which I know has been a theme of the conference more generally, these are some of the kind of designs that we do in partnership often with international designers. So these collections are done with Pippa Small, who is a London designer, and the UK high street retailer Monsoon. We've also worked with Kate Spade, the New York Fifth Avenue retailer. And here you can see the range of stones that we're using and how we're incorporating them into designs. And this is something that Future Brilliance are doing as well, and we've been working with them on how we can really, really make use of all the skills and of the artisans in order to get these products to the US market. So we've got amethyst on the left, we've got chrysocolla from Bamiyan, from the central heartlands, and then lapis on the right from Badakhshan. And this is now selling in Bloomingdale's and other places in the UK as well, and we think this can be a real generator of income for the artisans. A couple of snazzy pictures of people wearing our jewellery. That's the model Yasmin Lebon on the left in the latest photo shoot for Monsoon. And the bottom right, that's Angelina Jolie, who bought some of our gold love poem cuffs recently when she saw them. So she was really impressed by the quality of the work and is doing some repeat orders, so that's useful business. Now, I wanted to finish by mentioning an exhibition we're doing here in DC and really bring the story back to DC where we are today and to the US more generally. We've been going for 8 years now, and this is really the first time that we've really starting to make a push in the US in order to engage with the Afghan-American community here, but also business people in the US who we think we can do business with. I think this is a great moment for us as we've made this platform, we've shown that these products can sell and that they're at the quality that people need. But we're also doing our largest ever exhibition next year in 2016 at the Smithsonian, just down the road here at the Freer Sackler Galleries. And this is really focusing on this transformation of Afghanistan, the transformational potential of the craft industry and of these historic architectural techniques. So in Nowruz 2016, we will be doing this great celebration of Afghan culture right here in DC. And I would love any of you who are interested to get involved. We do need support. It won't happen unless we can raise the money. The Freer Sackler have approached us and say they want to do it, but we do need the funds. And I would love this to be something that the Afghan-American community, which has been so cohesive and supportive, could really get behind this project. I think it would be an incredible thing and an incredible way to keep Afghanistan in the public eye, but not as a source of international terrorism, but rather of stressing, almost rebranding Afghanistan for what it really has, which is extraordinary crafts, wonderful dynamic artisans, and highly skilled people. So thank you very much indeed for listening, and do please come up and talk. I'd love to meet as many of you as possible. It's great to see some old friends and familiar faces, but many I don't know, and I'd really love to get your input and hear any ideas you have, and we'd really love your support in any way. So thank you so much for listening, and have a good evening.
That presentation is so encouraging to those of us who look to the future in Afghanistan. It is so welcome to the whole discussion. And all I can say at this point is the Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce wishes to be your partner here in the United States as you go forward with your plans, and we can brainstorm some things together as well. And I'm sure our Afghan colleagues in the Afghan Chamber of Commerce and Industries and the Builders Association has tremendous interest in what you're doing. It's a very, very welcome symbol for the future of Afghanistan. And with that, I think we should go eat. Yes, we've kept you long enough.